is equal to cosine of z, and also cosine of z, and also cosh of z, cosine of iz is equal to cosh of z. On the other hand, sinh of iz is equal to I sine z, and sine of iz is equal to I times the sinh of z. All right. If you don't believe me, if you look at the notes when I post them, I actually have like one of these worked out. The cosine cosh ones are pretty obvious, right? But the sine one catches me off guard sometimes. Okay. Now, if you believe me about this theorem, what do they tell you about the length of cosh and cosine and sinh and sine? They're the same, right? They have the same magnitude, because take the magnitude of I is just 1. One of the things you'll prove in the homework, not this homework, but the next one, is the adding angles formula for cosine, right? I think. No, sine. So let's look at the sine. Sine of z is the sine of x plus iy. And by your future homework, that's the sine of x times the cosine of iy plus the cosine of x times the sine of iy. All right? And so that's actually sine x cosh of y plus I times the cosine of x times the sinh of y. And so what have we done? Well, we've answered the first interesting question for sine, right? The component functions of sine are apparently what? This and that. There you go. Those are the component functions of the complex sine. Maybe we should also ask the question, what's the modulus of the complex sine? Let's work on that, yeah? Uh-oh. No, I think I already got that other board. We should be okay. So what do you guys think? If we, now what would the modulus of sine be? I mean, of course it's useful just as a question because but if the modulus of, let me try to ask a somewhat leading question. Why would calculating the modulus of sine be helpful for understanding where sine could be 0? Yeah.
The modulus of 0 if the complex number is 0 and vice versa.
Right. So yeah, exactly. The modulus of sine is 0 if and only if sine is 0. Sine is 0. So if we can find a formula for the modulus, we can set that equal to 0, and that should reveal the possible places where the sine could be 0. But the modulus for sine is also here. Let's square it so we don't have to write square root. We've got what? We've got sine squared x. Sine squared x, cosh squared y, plus cosine squared x, sinh squared y. Now remember that cosh squared y minus sinh squared y is equal to what? It's equal to 1, right? So I can take my cosh squared and swap it out for a 1 plus sinh squared y. Right? And then, use your imagination here a bit, we can factor out, we got sine squared x plus sine squared x plus cosine squared x, also known as 1, times sinh squared y. Lo and behold, here's a nice formula. Sine squared x plus sinh squared y. So therefore, the modulus of sine z is the square root of sine squared x plus sinh squared y. note, sinh of y equals to 0 if and only if y equals to 0. This is something that's known from elementary calculus, or calculus 2, whatever. I know this from real calculus. Sinh is everywhere increasing because its derivative is cosh. Cosh has values greater than or equal to 1, so it's strictly increasing. The only place where it's 0 is when it has an input of 0. So, all right, so there's that, right? But now we have this formula, right? So let's ask the question, where is sine of z 0? So is this equal to, this equal to 0? Well, that must have that sine squared x is equal to 0, right? And you need that sinh squared y is equal to 0. Both of those are required for the sum of the squares to be 0, right? So that forces what? This forces x equals to 0, and this forces y is equal to n pi for some integer. And what I've just shown you, then, is that theorem, sine of z is equal to 0 if and only if z is equal to n pi for n in the integers. Now, of course, you might argue I only showed one direction of that, but I try not to talk about one direction in here, so sorry, I regret nothing. All right, so I don't know if that's helpful to you guys in your current homework, but that will be helpful to us in the course to know the only zeros of sine are the zeros we already know. The real zeros of sine are also the only zeros of the complex sine. Even though, by the way, the modulus of sine is not bounded by 1. Check this out. Like sinh can get huge. So complex sine can be very, very big in terms of modulus. And the similar calculations we'll go through for a complex cosine. However, interestingly, we'll see it's still true that cosine squared z plus sine squared z is equal to 1. Despite the fact both sine and cosine are blowing up in terms of modulus to infinity, they still conspire the sums of their squares to work back to 1 for all complex z. There's all kinds of just beautiful, beautiful calculations we'll see. All right, so I wanted to show you, like I said, I got 4 pages to share you with example 1. Let's do that. You'll see. Sorry, if I was smarter, I would have waited a second to do that, but not that smart. Okay, where am I? Come on. Well, you can do it. All right, there we go. So the start of the notes, I just have some blather, blather, blather about what's a function. And what do we mean by onto? What do we mean by one-to-one? All that jazz. Okay, so I don't think surge activity matters too much in here to us, but once I get started on these kinds of terminologies, it's hard for me to stop. All right, so that's what we started with. There was our example at the start of class, right? Can I make this full screen? I'm not sure that was any better.
Very tough, like, get rid of this side.
Thank you. And then the hamburger. Oh, no hamburger. Boop, 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 boop. All right, there we go. Too much. All right, so there was our definition of component functions. There's our first component function calculation. So it's very nostalgic, a whole hour ago. And So as we talked about, we go to the z-plane, the w-plane. This is a way to visualize the complex function. You could say, hey, which curves do you look at? You looked at lines. Could you also look at, don't you do that to me, circles? Yeah, we could. We could even look at like a sector, for example. A sector, we would allow the radius to range, say from 0 to 2. And I just looked at the polar angle ranging from 0 to pi over 2 in the z-plane, and then see what happens to that. The image of that sector under the square map gets me this. But of course, if r goes from 0 to 2, then like r squared goes from 0 to 4. So s goes from 0 to 4, and my pi over 2 angle gets expanded to a pi angle, right? All of this to say the square map, what it does to this quarter circle is it blows it up into a half circle, right? It expands it, and it, of course, that assumes that the sector has a positive radius, right? If the sector had a maximum radius which was less than 1, the square function would like smoosh it further. Yep.
I was thinking about.
You probably have to ask me after class, but go on.
So real functions don't have this problem because they're one-dimensional.
Ask me after class. I see where this is going. So here, this is a ray, which we start at the origin, and we go out to infinity at angle theta naught. I've talked to Jacob a lot. I know the nature of his questions. This will not be short. So this is a ray that starts at the origin and goes at angle theta naught. This right here is a ray that starts at z naught and goes at angle theta naught. So like if you want to parameterize a ray, there's how you do it, okay? And once you have the parametric formulas for the ray, you can feed them to the square function and see what happens, right? And if you square, I'm always working with the square function from the start of class. And so I square it, that gives me this, right? And so, okay, well, that's still a ray in the w plane, and apparently it's at angle 2 theta naught. That's easy enough to understand. Okay, fine. And then what if I make z naught non-trivial? Then I've got this when I square it. What's that? Now I don't know, all right? Now I don't know. But I can analyze it. I can look at a special case, which is what I do here. My special case is, oopsie. I look at, theta not equal to pi over 2 and z not equal to 1, which makes my my initial curve, this vertical ray starting at 1, going up and up and up, and it maps it to like half of a parabola actually, which I do some math to figure out. Like I get u is equal to this and v is equal to that, so I can eliminate time and just find the uv equation. U equals to 1 minus 1/4 v squared, which I recognize as being a sideways open parabola in the uv plane. And the reason I know it's only upper half comes back from here. I've got v is equal to 2t, but I've assumed that t is non-negative, therefore v is non-negative. All right. So that, okay, I was able to hack my way through and figure out what the thing looked like in that special case, right? But if you look at the purple thing, like working that out, what about circles? Well, a circle is parametrized in the form z naught plus re to the it, and we just want to go one time around, so 0 to 2 pi, right? And that gives a counterclockwise oriented circle with radius r and center z naught. If I square that, I get this. I don't know what that is. And I tried some things, well, let me just try to look at 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. Maybe I can see something from that. And I was like, well, I still don't know. So at this point, I'm like, okay, fine, technology. So I'll show you that. I'll show you that. So, I'm sorry, one more thing. No! Where'd you go? So in order to set, where did I? Son of a gun. We'll get to it. Give me a second here. So in order to use the technology, I first have to set it up. So I'm trying to understand how we map a circle under the square map. So this maps to that. But then in order to understand it, I must break it into real things if I'm going to use Desmos. So I say z naught is a plus ib. Z naught squared gives me that. 2 z naught re to the it gives me that. And likewise, re to the 2it gives me that, right? At this point, I can write down the real and the imaginary components of the parametrized curve in the W plane in terms of A and B and R, right? And I can use Desmos, like I was just showing you, to actually plot the thing, because you know, you can add these sliders. And so here's what happens. Okay, so that's just there I'm just letting the domain. All right, so I'll stop that. That doesn't, stop, that's not interesting. I'll just let it go full circle. How about that, yeah? If I get to about 6.4, it's gone a little bit more. All right, so A would be like the X component. All right, and we'll make everything go at once. I'm not sure that's a good idea, actually. Let me stop. Whoop. Let's see here, okay, so what you're looking at, the green circle is the input. So technically the green circle belongs in the Z-plane. The red circle is the output. Yep.
It looks like the red circle is kind of following a parabola. Is that the same parabola that we drew?
Maybe, but look what happens.
Oh.
So let me try to move.
So it just stops being a circle.
Yeah, it's not even a circle. And it becomes other things. As to what exactly is happening here, I don't know. I haven't studied it long enough. You could spend a long time trying to analyze exactly what's going on here. But the point is that the square map takes a circle and it makes it into something interesting. And I would need technology to fully grasp what's going on. On the other hand, the vertical and horizontal lines we looked at for the exponential function earlier today, that we can do by hand and come to a complete mastery of it without any confusion if we just sit and figure it. Anyway, so next time I will look harder at the issue of the injectivity and the local inverses. That requires time and, you know, not hurrying at all. So anyway, thanks guys.